Well. We're back again this week with another video talking about what we're going to be seeing this week in Mythic Plus and kind of what we've seen for the past a couple of days. Now more than ever, I feel like people have been negatively talking about Mythic Plus, particularly on the WoW Reddit, where all of everybody is basically throwing their hat in the ring in terms of how they feel about Mythic Plus just in general. And so we're going to talk, and I've pulled up some of the Reddit threads, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's actually being said on Reddit and kind of talk about like what's actually been going on. But before that, we got to talk about what's going to be happening this week in Mythic Plus, because this week we have the last of the Xal'atath's bargain affixes. We have Devour, and Devour is fairly straightforward. Basically, players get a debuff on them. It's called Void Rift, or it's called Lingering Void. And it can be dispelled by an Omni Dispel. It can be dispelled by things such as Mass Dispel, such as Imp Dispel, such as, Poison Cleansing Totem, such as whatever, right? And so it's an Omni Dispel, and whenever it gets dispelled off, it grants players 2% health and 4% critical strike, and it stacks up to 5 times. So this is pretty solid, right? Now, the other ways that you can potentially remove it, aside from dispels, is you can heal it off. And so it is a heal absorb for 50% of your HP. And it's not a traditional healing absorb. Basically, it's a dot that requires 50% of your HP to be healed over a certain period of time, over 15 seconds, and then it would possibly be removed. But it's coded as a heal absorb, so like you can overheal it and whatnot. And so that's kind of how it works. You'll figure it out, I think, once you start playing with it. It's pretty easy. If you want recommendations, I would recommend bringing just like a shaman to your group and having them playing Poison Cleansing Totem for pretty much every single dungeon. That's probably the easiest way of dealing with it. If you bring 2 shamans and they both have Poison Cleansing Totem, those 2 shamans and then just one of their dispels, one of their decurses, can remove the entire party's debuffs off of them instantly. And so 2 shamans would be even better. And you can get that from, say, Enhance and Resto Shaman. So it's Invited Shaman week, as if every other week was an Invited Shaman week. We've been continuing to see players progress. I feel like more players are now breaking through that 11 to 12 threshold than ever before. Some people are actually starting to even be able to do keys as high as 14s, where we're seeing Mists and Auracars being done at that level. There's also a Borealis that was done on 14, which is incredibly impressive, because I don't think that Borealis is like that easy, all things considered. I think the first part of Borealis is actually quite hard. We saw some dungeon tuning last weekend. Basically, no other dungeon tuning has been seen since. The other big thing is that we have some class tuning, and how this class tuning ends up affecting Mythic Plus, it's not too much. There's a couple of specific things that I want to shout out for things that probably do end up affecting Mythic Plus a little bit. Blistering Scales going from 20% of your armor to from 30% of your armor to 20% of your armor. This is a nerf to tank survivability across the board for compositions that were utilizing an augmentation evoker. There is also a Restoration Shaman Earth Shield change, where Earth and Harmony now causes the Earth Shield to reduce damage taken by 3%, and was previously 5%. This also ends up negatively impacting, healers' ability to be able to keep tanks alive just a little bit. Those are probably the biggest 2 things for tank survivability. There are Prop Paladin buffs, which are fairly solid. There are Brewmaster Monk buffs to a hero talent they ended up not playing. There's a Preservation Evoker nerf, which doesn't necessarily impact them that much in Mythic Plus, because they're playing Chrono Warden a lot in Mythic Plus, not only Flame Shaper like they have been in Raid. There's another Resto Druid buff, which we're one more of those away from them being okay. Beyond that, not too many specs end up actually moving in terms of like how I feel about them. The only one that maybe moves a little bit, Shadow Priest. I actually think that another buff to Shadow Priest here is going to end up impacting them a little bit. It's getting a little bit damage on their Mind Blast, death damage, Void Bolt damage, Apparition damage, all increased. And some of the Void Weaver stuff, basically they're playing Archon, so none of the Void Weaver stuff really matters, but the Apparition, Void Bolt, Death, all of those things, especially with how Psychic Link functions for Shadow Priest, those are probably the ones that I'm most looking at in terms of affecting maybe potential viability for Mythic Plus. Shadow Priest wasn't like the worst possible thing ever. It wasn't very popular by any means, especially once you start looking up at like 12 and up keys, not super popular, but I think that they'll become a little bit better. And so, yeah, let's take a look at kind of what we're seeing from the 12 and up keys. It's a lot of Resto Shamans, a lot of Frosty Ks, it's a lot of Aug Evokers, and then everything else, is kind of interspersed, right? We're seeing a couple of tanks being utilized, whether it be Prot Warriors or Bear Druids. You also see some Vintage Demon Hunter representation and some Blood Decay representation. All 4 of those see okay play. Assassination Rogue is, of course, very strong, as is Arcane Mage. And then, you have some other specs. Ret Pally's not bad. Assassination Rogue is not bad. Having Demon Hunter can be pretty good. Aff Warlock can be pretty good as well once you get to that 12 plus key range. And if we take a look at mythicstats.com/meta, top 2,000 key runs each week, of course, we get a better understanding of like what this actually looks like whenever you compare all the specs. Basically, what we're seeing is the healing is starting to be dominated, especially at the very high end, by Restoration Shaman. We already kind of knew this, right? 52% of the specs, or 52% of the healers that are in the top 2,000 runs are Restoration Shaman. It is very dominant. 52% of that is very high amount for Restoration Shaman. Typically in a very stale meta, you'll see about 75% of the top 2,000 keys be a very specific healer or tank. Healing and tank, 75% of that mark where you're like, holy shit, that was a lot. But 52%, still quite high, especially since last week we had 70%, which is even crazier. And then tanks, like I was saying, Prot Warrior has the highest amount of representation, but Blood DK and Guardian Druid both make up some amount of the meta as well, which isn't any small amount to scoff at. And then for DPS, Arcane Mage, Frost DK, Ret Pally, all pretty solid. You even have like Ellie Shaman, you have Augavoker also being highly represented. For DPS, I think the meta is fairly fluid in terms of like what compositions you're going to see people playing. Balanced Druid is even very good as well. You're seeing a lot of different stuff just kind of really be brought into the mix in terms of like what you're going to be seeing. Okay. That's kind of what we've been seeing with meta. That's kind of what we've been seeing with what you expect out of the affix this week. Let's kind of talk about what we've been seeing with just like the state of the game. So I found a bunch of posts on the WoW Reddit that are just like, keys are getting bricked left and right this season. Is it just me, or keys just not being finished a lot of times? It feels like there's no incentive for most to continue. A +9 after one wipe, Bloodlust is gone. You're going to end up depleting the key. Why would they? Staying for a 2 out of 5 chance of getting an item, which you can't upgrade further than 619 because you get 3 crests for finishing. Why would they stay? Blizzard's changed too much this expansion with the Mythic Plus squish and delves and the inability to get crests and progress further than 619 anywhere but Mythic raids and +9. Players are pissed, honestly, just very upset about the entire state of this. I mean, you see this as well. Actually, I don't want to go this one. I'll discuss this one. We've come full circle on gearing again. The hardest content should reward the best gears in quotation marks. And then the other quote is, everyone should have the opportunity to scale into the hardest content, aka I should be able to outgear the hardest content with gear from the easiest content. The upgrade system within the crest system was a compromise. Now the loud topics seem to be, it takes too long to get the best gear, which is just another derivation of I should be able to outgear the hardest content with gear from easier content. Basically, players that are good enough get myth gear or are currently getting myth gear. Players that are not good enough to get myth gear are not. This is how it should be. I will admit that Mythic Plus is a bit rough at the moment, needs tuning, but that doesn't mean that every player should be able to step in and time a +10 after basically just never doing it before. It's kind of tough. Players are struggling. I think that the Challenger's Peril, the 15 seconds of death penalty, is proving very difficult for a lot of players. And in the past, you've been able to get your myth track level gear from pretty easy keys. I don't want to say they're trivial, but fairly easy keys, all things considered. And now Blizzard has really upped the difficulty of what is going to reward you myth track level gear. And players are rightly pretty upset about this. Additionally, I also saw this post. So people spent all Dragonflight Season 4 demanding affixes be removed, increasing the dungeon difficulty as a compromise, and praised the changes when they were announced. So, what happened? Basically, they were praising the Kiss Curse system and how Sanguine moved and Mythic changes and affix removed, and talked about how this would be great for pushing keys. And then they go, so what happened? Isn't the current state of Mythic Plus exactly what people wanted? The majority of complaints now are that gearing is too difficult, but no one is really able to explain why they need maxed out Myth Track gear whenever they just spend most of their time last expansion working towards AOTC or getting their portal or completing 15s. And the answer is mainly just to stop gatekeeping gear. Those players wouldn't have gotten Myth Track gear last expansion either, and there's always been a ceiling to gear levels depending on your skill. It's kind of interesting to see both sides of this, where I think that the system actually is improving. I do think that the Challenger's Peril, where the 15 seconds death penalty, is just too hard, But I think that in terms of, ramping up the general difficulty of the dungeons and making the system, a lot more challenging whenever you're actually getting myth track level gear, that's about the equivalent of doing some of these mythic bosses. That to me makes sense. I think it's a bit tough on the gilded crests. Like Max made a tweet here. You don't start getting gilded crests until you're doing a +9. There's a ton of people hard capped at 619 that are not good enough / geared enough to realistically do 9s. At some point, you got to get good, but like, it's one of those situations that I think that you should be able to get gilded crests, craft gear, be able to upgrade your hero track gear to the end of hero track, because delves are in the situation where delves give limitless hero track gear, especially from maps. And then you just kind of are like, where am I supposed to go from here? And in the past, you would actually get myth track gear from, the vault, or myth track gear from Mythic Plus at the end of the vault and stuff like that. Now it's even harder than that. And I think that the system is maybe a little bit too hard. I would be looking to maybe put the vault back down at a 9. Don't necessarily make people do a 10. Lower the penalty from the Challenger's Peril. Those are probably the two main changes that I would be looking to make. Also, maybe moving where you can actually end up getting these gilded crests from, because I've had some friends that are struggling a lot at being able to even complete like 9s. And I think that this is a situation where if you were playing with a constant group of players and you're actually progressing these keys, you're getting better with time. But if you're just like this solo player that is not playing with any of their friends, and they're just trying to pug into every single group that they want or they need, of course they're going to be stuck. And basically they actually end up getting like hard stuck at like a key level that is probably the correct key level for them to be hard stuck at, like it or not. And like the best way to improve then is to find a group of players that are like your friends and then like learn and progress with them. But players don't want to play like that. And I think it's been a bit difficult whenever Blizzard has kind of shaken up what you actually need to do to be able to achieve like the max of the gear. For a lot of players, the end goal is to actually get the portals or like do the 10 one time and they never replay it. But for some players, they actually want to like fill up their vault with 10s. And for the players that feel like they should or want to fill up their vault with 10s, this is a system that like is annoying to them, right? Where for players that, that 10 is their peak, these players don't really care because the 10 was already their pinnacle anyways, right? That their in-game goal, like what they want to do by the end of the season is have that 10. They don't need to have that 10 right now. It's been very interesting. The WoW Reddit, a lot of people are very upset because I think there's a little bit of whiplash with the changes. And I think that the whiplash with the changes has been a bit jarring to some people. I think overall, the system has improved. I do think the Guile, this is just like the sweaty nerd take, is that the Guile shouldn't be 20% health and damage. It should just be 20% health. I think that the Challenger's Peril should be changed to something else that's not 15 seconds flat, because this is too hard for people. All keyers, honestly, this Challenger's Peril is just too tough. But then the rest of the system, I felt like it's actually been fairly solid. I don't know how it's going to feel later on whenever we don't have affixes or anything like that for like high key pushing, and I don't know how it's going to feel like next season, but I personally think that right now it's been more or less okay. Anyways, we'll be back next week talking about what we've seen so far in Mythic Plus. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.